I think I consider my crowning achievement for this talk not tripping on my way up. That was like the big, thank you, thank you, thank you. As long as we are doing some applause, before I get started, I want to thank a few people. First of all, there's a group of people who do, I think, a metric ass ton of work and get sometimes not as much praise as they deserve. The folks who are doing the cameras and the lights and the microphones and all that. So round of applause for all the AV folks, right? Also, I want to take a minute and express my thanks to the organizers of PyOhio. Applause. Not only for everything they're doing, but you might have noticed there's a couple of folks up front. They're the interpreters from Interpret US, or Interpret Us. I wasn't sure exactly which one it was. A little more than a week ago, my friend Destiny O'Connor and I approached them and said, is there a way we could make this a little bit more accessible? And they made it happen. And to have that happen in just over a week is absolutely astonishing. It's not something that is very easy to do, and they made it happen, and it communicates volumes about PyOhio's commitment to making this an event that is open and accessible for everyone. So again, round of applause for everything they've done. So it has been a great conference. It has been a long conference, and it's been challenging for some of us with a lot of opinions to sit in the room and listen to other people talk about their opinions without being able to share ours. So I thought that I would give you all a chance to express some opinions here today. Some of them are more challenging than others, but I thought we'd all be able to stretch our legs. So we'll start off with something relatively easy. Pancakes or omelets? Who is team pancake in the room? Okay, and then team omelet. All right, there we go. Next up, carnations or roses? Who's for carnations? Not that, oh, okay, good. And who's for roses? There we go, okay, all right, very good. Let's see, we've got sweats or actual clothes. All right, so how many people would rather just walk around their entire life in sweats? And how many of you degenerates would want to put on clothes every day? All right, fine. All right, we'll go with that one. Okay, PyCharm or VS Code? We're getting into the nitty-gritty now. Who's for PyCharm? All right, and we will not judge. We are not a space that judges people. Who's for VS Code? Very good. Okay, next up. Oh, we're not doing that one. All right, the reason why I start with that is because after a career in technology spanning 37 years, I've discovered that we get to choose a lot. We might not like what we have to choose between. I am old. Some of you might remember this. Many of you probably don't. Neither of these choices was very good, to be honest. We also might not choose, like the fact that we have to choose any of these things at all. What were they thinking? Bone phone. What were they thinking? Why do I need any of these? These are all real products. We also don't like how often we have to choose. Don't try to read this slide. It's an eye exam that says shit changes all the time. In fact, one of my favorite moments at the start of the pandemic was when the news would continually talk about it's the new normal. And I'm like, what, you mean when every aspect of our job completely changes and we have to learn entirely new ways to do things? Yeah, in tech, we have a special word for that. We call it, oh, look, it's Tuesday. So the sheer volume of things that we have to choose can be overwhelming and creates a number of challenges, but maybe none as much as the paralyzing fear that we might choose wrong, which is why I'd like to welcome you to my talk today, looking back across a lifetime of poor technical choices. My name is Leon Adato. I'm a middle-aged white dude giving a talk at a conference for a change. Right, exactly. Like, you don't need, the only two things that I want you to know about this, to understand about this slide, are that I do own that suit, and I did pick this picture because it inspires confidence that I know what the hell I'm talking about, but also you can find me on social media everywhere as Leon Adato. That's the only two things that are important. What's more important is that you understand this is what I call an oyster talk. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I have 45 minutes. I cannot teach you anything in 45 minutes. In fact, in that amount of time, about the only thing I'm able to do reliably is irritate you. Now, I call this an oyster talk because when an oyster becomes irritated, it does one of two very important things. It either creates a beautiful pearl or it dies. I sincerely hope no one here is irritated to death, but I do feel it's necessary to warn you it's a possibility. Instead, what I hope is that I give you just the grain of an idea that you will then layer over with your own ideas and experiences until what you have is something that is polished and personal and valuable to you. So let's get started. Right up front, I'm not going to bury the lead. There is no such thing as a poor technical choice. And I know because I've made some doozies, and that is really what we are talking about today. All right, I take it back. There are some things that are measurably, demonstrably, definitively poor technical choices. For example, not having backups is a bad technical choice. There's no way around that. Also, confusing that you have replicas or mirrors or RAID or SAN or VMs, and those are not backups either, but if you think they are, that is a poor technical choice. Moving fast and breaking things in production, bad technical choice. In test, sure, absolutely. You do have a test environment, right? Because not having one would also be a bad technical choice. Trying to do it all yourself might seem like a personal choice, but it is in fact a poor technical choice. Using Oracle for literally anything ever. Starting a land war in Asia is not a poor technical choice, but I had to put it there for all of the Princess Bride fans out there. Represent. Okay, with those aside, let's talk about my first poor technical choice. It started all the way back in '84 when Case Western Reserve University and IBM and AT&T decided that they would start the world's first free online community. Now, for those people who didn't grow up in Cleveland like I did, Case Western at the time was a university that was not known for having a very big technical department at all. IBM, of course, was the stodgiest computer company on the planet, and AT&T was the zombified remains of a phone company that had almost been legislated out of existence. What could go wrong with this partnership, right? Amazingly, it worked. They created a free public community computer system. Now, I spent a lot of time on Freenet. There are a few reasons. First of all, it was free. Second of all, I was 16, and on Freenet, you could reliably download UU-encoded ASCII porn. Also, you had a 1-hour timeout, but if you became a moderator for one of the special interest groups, one of the SIGs, you had unlimited time. So I became a moderator for the Dungeons & Dragons SIG, because of course I did. I also became the moderator for the word processing SIG and the spreadsheets, a bunch of other things, right? You would need to be a child of the 80s to understand exactly how much time you could sink into a dial-up connection, but I did. And one could argue that it was a complete waste of, in fact, my parents did argue that it was a complete waste of my time, a bad technical choice. So what good did it do me? Well, Freenet was basically a glorified message board, right? You would go into those special interest groups and you would type messages to other people on there, and you might type an email to one of the other 20 people who had an email address in 1984. In order to do that, you needed to pick an editor. Now, Freenet had 3 choices. The first one was Fred, Freenet editor, Fred. It was an abomination. No one used it, okay? So we'll just set that aside. They also had Emacs or VI. Entirely randomly, I picked VI. And because I was 16 at the time, I didn't know any better, so I learned VI as if it was the most natural thing in the world to type :WQ bang to save a file. Like, it makes total sense, right? So that was great. Fast forward to one of my first jobs. I was working in desktop support at Allen Bradley. It's now Rockwell Automation. And we were doing our thing, sitting down in the bullpen, and the Unix admin came in. They needed help supporting a new system. And the Unix admin was your typical Unix admin. He just sort of came in and huffed down. He had the personality of a bulldog. And he said, all right, I got to pick one of you boneheads to support this thing. And before I can even tell you the system, I need to teach you this utility that no one ever understands. It's called VI. You know that scene in Jurassic Park? That was me. So I spent all this time on Freenet, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had this opportunity to move up in my career. By the way, the system that we were talking about was Bind version 8. For those people who don't know what that was, it was the first production-ready version of DNS. There is no point in this talk where I will tell you that DNS was or is a good choice for anything. Just want to make that clear. All right, next poor choice. Desktop support was not actually my first job. My first job was doing training for adults. I worked for a little company down in the Railroadman's building on the near west side, and I would teach people how to use WordStar and Lotus 123 and WordPerfect. And my boss thought it would be a really good idea if I would get a certification to sort of prove that I knew what I was talking about. So I took 80 hours to take the WordPerfect certified resource test. No. I didn't take 80 hours to study for the test. The test took 80 hours to take. They sent it to you on a disk, and it would time you, and you answered questions. I feel like this one was, back in my day, we had to certify 2 miles uphill, both way in the snow, right? I mean, it took me a long time. And here we are in the year of our tech, 2025, and where is WordPerfect now? Like literally, where is WordPerfect now? So it got sold to somebody last week, I don't know who, right? So you could argue that was a waste of time. So WordPerfect had gone the relatively unique, especially for its time, route of not showing you the actual codes. At the time when you want to do bolding or formatting, you actually typed those codes onto the screen and you saw them. WordPerfect said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to show you a representation of what it looks like. But of course, sometimes you had to debug a problem where there were overlapping codes, so they gave you this thing called reveal codes. And I got really good at reveal codes, which is why just a few years later, it took me exactly 15 minutes to learn how HTML worked, because it was exactly the same format. And that helped me in a lot of ways, but I'll get to that. If you're anything like me, your browser has about 8,000 tabs open at any given moment. But in the days before the internet, and yes, I'm going there, in the days before the internet, what I would do is get my hands on every tech magazine, like the ones made out of paper, and I could, and I would tear pages out. I would make IT news scrapbooks. I had IT news murder boards, and I would have lines connecting different things. But worst was that I would try to talk to my coworkers about what I was reading. I would literally say things like, hey, did you hear how Borland has taken on the LIM standard? Like, I was not a lot of fun at parties. I was so desperate to share this information that the Unix admin, the same guy, he took pity on me. He built a web server, an internal web server, and he taught me HTML. That's where I learned it. And so I would retype all the news. Yes, I would retype all the news articles because I have no impulse control and very little common sense. And I would type them all in and build web pages out of them and then have them archived, right? No one read these. Literally nobody read these. But I will tell you that I got so good at building web pages that a few years later, when I needed it, having that in my bones, being able to create HTML pages like that, allowed me to start up a side hustle, and it literally allowed me to put food on the table. So you could argue it was a bad technical choice, but it did help. But there's more. Week after week after week, typing all of that HTML code in got a little tedious, and so I went back to the Unix admin, who clearly was a bad influence on my life, and said, isn't there a way that I could, templatize it, or their macros, or something like that? And so he taught me enough Perl to be dangerous. Like the groan. Oh, no. Yeah, so I wrote ridiculously complex Perl scripts that would take the raw text and slam on HTML codes, and then it would push it all together. It would figure out what the next file name needed to be, would update index. I was very proud of these scripts that I wrote. But first of all, it was Perl. And second of all, like I said, nobody read these. So what good was this? What kind of choice was I making with my time when I could have been spending it doing something else? I've been doing monitoring and observability for 27 years now, but my start came with a little utility, a tool called Tivoli. Since then, I have used things like OpenView and Nagios and SolarWinds and New Relic and Catchpoint and stuff like that. But my first love was Tivoli. For its time, Tivoli was a comprehensive, multi-million-dollar solution. It had modules for system inventory and for software distribution and for monitoring and metrics collection and for event correlation. It was also 4 Perl scripts in a trench coat that would take the data and lob it over the wall to a Corba backend database. Nobody with an ounce of common sense wanted anything to do with this freak show of a solution. But of course, I heard Perl and I was all in, right? And just like when I was 16 and learning VI and not knowing any different, I was too new to the world of monitoring and observability to really understand how truly awful Tivoli was. But doing that set me up for my career from that point until now. Now, Tivoli was good at a lot of things. Windows was not one of them. And so we had to find a way to get Windows data into the monitoring system, and we settled on using this weird third-party tool called SMS. Integrating the data from SMS to Tivoli wasn't just hard. At the time, all the tools were built. It's not just that they were hard to integrate, they actively resisted integration. We spent months trying to make the two things talk to each other, and honestly, at the end of the day, we probably should have just built a solution ourselves. Meanwhile, of course, SMS was bought by Microsoft. It became Microsoft SMS, which became Microsoft, SCCM, which became SCOM, which became ECM, which became whatever the hell they're calling it this week, and nobody cares because nobody uses it. So again, poor technical choice, right? I spent all this time learning how to do it, and for what? However, I got to tell you, we spent a lot of time learning about data integration and transformation and normalization, and those are techniques and ideas that I use even today. Now, Tivoli had a GUI, a graphical user interface, and you could do things like, group systems together for software distribution, and sometimes, because it was, software distribution, you needed to make groups of groups, and of course, then you'd want to make groups of groups. Oh, no, you couldn't do that. Every single time I tried to do that, the entire thing would explode, like almost literally, and the database would corrupt, and I would either have to rebuild it from scratch or pull it from backups, and I really didn't understand what was going on. You remember that Corba database I mentioned? Yeah. Corba was one of the first object-aware databases in the industry, but it was built. It was actually designed to only handle 3 layers of containership. After that, the entire database would blow up. Over 3 separate weekends I spent rebuilding the Tivoli database, I learned a lot about the impact of downstream consequences. Now, this wasn't my poor technical choice, but I did learn that understanding the architecture that you are selecting and implementing, and sometimes that the software tool's pedigree really does matter, was a lesson I was able to take away from that. Now, the work that I did in Tivoli got me noticed in the company. I was working at Nestle. And so after a little bit, they offered me what was basically the chance of a lifetime. They offered to pack up my family and I and move us to the world headquarters in Switzerland, where I would be part of a team that was building a monitoring solution for 250,000 systems in 5,000 locations across the globe. Really big project, really big opportunity. I was very excited. So they paid for everything. We sold everything we owned. We sold our house and our cars. We packed ourselves up. We landed in Switzerland on September 1st, 2001, 10 days before 9/11. That was hard. But what a lot of people forget is that it was 6 months, almost to the day, before the dot-com bubble crashed, or burst. And at that point, they shut down all projects, they packed us all up, they sent us back home, to the middle of a recession. I was out of work for 18 months. That, of all the stories I'm sharing with you, was the moment when I thought, I've made a choice that has ruined everything forever. And during that time, I learned a little bit about humility. I learned a lot about myself and mental health. I learned how not to see myself as a person and not see myself as a source of a paycheck. I learned who my friends were and who I could rely on. And I learned that even in times that are very, very tight, there are still moments of real joy. Okay, that got heavy. So a little bit of a palate cleanser, a little bit of a poor technical choice palate cleanser. I say that because it didn't happen to me. I didn't do this one, but I watched it. I was very close to seeing it, okay? So what happened? All right, so I saw 2 high-severity outages, production outages, that were 1 week apart. Both involved a configuration change that happened in production. One person got a stern talking to. The other person was walked out the door immediately. So what was the difference? Well, the first person made the change. They recognized what had happened. They immediately flagged it to the team. They took ownership of it. And then they said, look, I don't have the permission or the skill to fix this, but I will be in the room. I will bring you coffee. I will scribe notes. I will do whatever it takes to be here to hear what's going on so that I can learn more about what happened so that it never happens again, and maybe I'm a better technician for it. That was the first person. The second person made the change. System crashed. They tried to hide it. There's always logs. Always logs. So one lesson is pretty obvious, right? Like, own your mistakes. You don't try to hide them. There isn't in tech, or at least there shouldn't be, any expectation that we are perfect. There is, or should be, an expectation that we are decent. Next lesson. A few years ago, I was tweaking an alert in an application that I was using, and I accidentally cut 772 tickets twice in 15 minutes. The worst part, true story, worst part was I didn't know I had done it until the entire help desk came up to my cubicle to invite me down to their area to manually close 1,544 tickets. By hand. There was a mass close function. They wouldn't let me use it. Now, with time, some reflection, some therapy, maybe some alcohol, I can reflect on that moment and wonder, like, what really went wrong? Was it the tool that let it happen? Was it the operator who did it? I think there's enough blame to go around. I think really it was an immature understanding of what monitoring and alerts really are, but that's a talk for another day. What I want to point out today is this screen. It was created by the vendor after I had that experience, and shortly after I was hired by them to be a developer relations advocate for them. Because once I got inside, I was able to argue eloquently, articulately, passionately, and persistently that this needed to happen. And it has helped innumerable people not make this kind of mistake ever again. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have been able to argue for that or advocate for that if I hadn't had that experience. As I said at the beginning, the sheer number of choices that we face as IT professionals and the possible negative outcomes can be paralyzing. It is a Whitman sampler of crap, right? For example, do we use Kubernetes or do we not use Kubernetes? Do we use ChatGPT, that is how you're supposed to say it, or not? Do you use blockchain or not? Probably not. Do you use this framework or that language or this platform? Do you use AWS or Azure or GCP or all three of them? Do you use Oracle for literally anything ever? No. Do you use on-premises versus colo versus cloud versus a hybrid approach? Do you monitor with this package or that solution? Do you use all the solutions? Do you build it yourself? It can be paralyzing not only because we're worried about getting it wrong, but also because we're afraid that when we pick one of these, we won't be available to pick the next thing. So one of my heroes, Seth Godin, talked about this technical FOMO, fear of missing out. He said, this thing that you have right now is worth working with because it offers so many opportunities compared with just waiting for the next thing. Now, I know I said at the beginning, my point was there are no bad technical choices, but that seems a little bit trite. It seems a little bit like simplistic, right? Maybe the real treasure was the cables we collected along the way. Or maybe it's something else. Let me give you one more story. The word loquacious means, I have to read this, tending to talk a great deal. I learned the word loquacious in the 4th grade because that's what my teacher put on my report card. I would see it a lot more. I'd also see words like, not yet, I'd see words like over-communicative, oversharing, and also my personal favorite, diarrhea of the mouth. I talked a lot. I also wrote a lot. I love to write stuff down. I love to scribe. And I had very detailed notes about certain things. For example, if you wanted to know whose chair made the fart noise at 11:15 in social studies, I was your man. My notes might not have included any details about the War of 1812, but they were, in their own way, comprehensive. And also, from the time I was about 10 years old until all the way through college, I devoted 100% of my time to pursuing a degree in theater. In fact, while I was here in Cleveland, I hung out at the Cleveland Playhouse with this guy who directed Toy Story 3 and Coco. I did not direct Toy Story 3 or Coco. So all that time that I spent, you could argue, was a complete waste of my time. I'm not doing any of those things today, except maybe. I'm a developer relations advocate, technical evangelist, whatever you want to call it. I've actually worked a job where I was called a head geek. Doesn't matter. This is the work that I typically do. On top of this, you'll remember that my first job was in the classroom teaching adults how to use different software packages, which meant I needed to be able to relate to a diverse group of people every single day. I had to present detailed information in an interesting way and also to the level of the people in the room. Sometimes I had to take a technical pie in the face myself just to relieve the anxiety in the room, right? Also, all that writing has served me pretty well in the blogging circuit as a DevRel. And the theater degree doesn't hurt when I'm standing up in front of you folks and trying to tell what hopefully is an entertaining story. So how do we take our experiences? How do we learn from them, grow from them? So I got a story for that. There's a person who was seeking answers to the meaning of life, the secret for happiness. And he climbed a mountain and he found a guru and he said, "Oh, wise sage, what is the secret to life happiness?" And the sage smiled a big smile and he said, "Oh, that's very easy. Make good choices." And the person said, "That's not easy. How do I learn to make good choices?" And the person said, "Oh, that's easy too. Just get experience." And the person said, "But that's also not easy. How do I get this experience?" And the sage smiled the biggest smile, and she said, "That's the easiest thing of all. Make bad choices." If you are new to Python, new to a particular job, new to a company or a team, fresh out of school, or pivoting into this crazy world of technology from doing something completely different, then I'm going to share a secret with you that isn't really so secret, and it's a secret that all the not new people in this room would be happy to share with you also. And that's that the mistakes that you make, the so-called poor technical choices, will teach you more and be the reasons that you grow and learn and succeed far more than any success that was done it on the first try, nothing but net. I mean, if you make a poor technical choice, take a minute, take a breath, and embrace it. I mean, really embrace it. Like, celebrate it and love it and glory in that moment, because that's how you're going to get better. Our poor choices don't define us. They don't even limit us. What defines us is what we do after that moment. As developers, I think we should understand this most of all, better than most folks, because literally nothing works when we start on it, right? I mean, the ultimate expression of a broken program is the blank screen we face in PyCharm or VS Code when we get started. We are constantly working to take a program from a state of ultimate brokenness, that blank screen, into a state of workingness, right? Line by line. And that's not easy. There are days that I feel like I do nothing except make mistake after mistake after mistake until finally I have that moment of, holy shit, that works. How did that happen? I started out by telling you there are no poor technical choices. And that's because it was never about the tech. It was not about the tech. It was always about you. I've left this slide blank to make room for what you bring to the story. We all pick up technical puzzle pieces throughout our journey, and often when we pick them up, it seems like there's not going to be any place for this to go. But the truth is they will all fit somewhere eventually. In fact, I felt so strongly about this and that everyone's journey is interesting and valuable and worth talking about that I made this talk, the one I'm giving, open source. You can download it from GitHub. You can add your information, your examples, your experiences to it, and you can put it in as a CFP at a conference, even this conference, because to be perfectly honest, if you gave this exact talk, if everyone in the room gave this talk, My Lifetime of Poor Technical Choices, they would all be compelling and interesting and infinitely different. So this talk is open source. Go ahead and use it if you want to. There is never going to be a part of your skills, your experience, your life that won't apply at some point. The trick, the real lesson, is that we have to commit ourselves to showing up, just showing up, ready to apply both who we are and what we know every day. And if we do that, there really will be no poor technical choices. Meanwhile, I did warn you at the start of this talk that I might irritate you. If you are feeling slightly irritated, this is the time that you may want to start to reflect and consider and mull over that and see what pearl you produce. In the meantime, I am ready for your questions. Thank you. All right, enjoy the rest of the conference. Please use the most important part of this conference, which is all of you. That you are all people we are all people who are passionate about Python and the Cleveland Tech community. And this is the moment when you can find out all the other opportunities, all the other connections, all the other bases of knowledge and experience. So in the next, hour, is that what we have? You can use that to really find your next connections that may last a lifetime. Thank you again to the organizers and to all of you for spending your weekend.